Good morning, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. Do leave a comment if you like what you're seeing, if you want me to change anything. But let's get to it. Today and this week, I want to talk a bit about the differences between B2B and B2C. So for those of you who don't know, B2B stands for business to business. B2C stands for business to consumer. And of course, naturally, with B2B, you're selling more into organizations. With B2C, you're selling direct to consumer. Typically, when people think about these two different sales strategies, people think that they're quite different because B2B is usually a more complex process. You're selling into an organization. There are typically multiple stakeholders that need to get involved, while B2C is directly to an individual. It's usually more straightforward, right? But a quick forward, I want you to consider H to H. So that stands for human to human. Remember, people buy, companies pay. So for today's video, it's going to be split into two parts. I'm going to first talk about B2C, and then next week I'll talk a bit more about B2B. So what I'll try to do in these videos is I'll try to go a bit more into outlining the decision-making process. I won't talk too much about building customer personas because, like I mentioned in my previous videos, there's a lot of resources out there for it. But I want to go a bit more into how the different decision-making process and prospecting processes work for B2B versus B2C. So quickly, for B2C, so if you have a product or service that's more consumer-centric, you will typically find that your activities are more marketing-related rather than sales. And this is especially the case if you have a low-priced product or if you have low margins. And why this happens is because you'll find that sales-related activities are typically a lot more expensive than marketing activities. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Because when you think about it, for marketing activities, you're usually putting up ads, your budgets are usually pretty small, and you can have a much larger audience. For sales, you have dedicated sales reps going out, speaking one-on-one to individuals. Sales reps are usually also very expensive to maintain. They're usually the highest compensated individual in the company. So that being said, I actually do encourage you to think about how you can work in sales-related activities if you have a B2C product as well. And the reason why this is important is because marketing-related activities are things that you don't really have a lot of control over. So you can put out an ad, you could reach 1,000 people, but you don't really know who's actually going to take action. If you have a sales-related activity running, where maybe you have reps calling people or going out meeting people, going door to door, even as traditional as that sounds, those activities tend to generate more predictable results because you can know that, let's say if you do X amount of calls, you're guaranteed to have at least one or two of them convert, for example. So how then can you start to consider sales in a B2C context? So what I would say is if you have a physical product, what you want to consider things like selling into retail. So you're selling to an organization or company or another business that will sell on your behalf to consumers, right? Finding distributors, finding affiliate partners, even the act of bringing on board other sales reps. So if you can sell to other people, to have them sell your product on your behalf, that's also a part of the sales process. So as much as I hate to encourage this, multi-level marketing, like that's also a method of selling a consumer level product in a sales related way. So think about how you can work sales into a B2C context. On the decision-making profiles then, typically there are three main consumer profiles when we look at a consumer. So first off, you have the decision maker, you have the user, and then you have the advocate. They can all be one and the same person. They could all also be very different people. So to give you an example, we had a company that we worked with where the founder was creating this bracelet that young teenagers could wear and go to a party. And what will happen is these bracelets will detect if your drink has been spiked by changing color. So as you can imagine, the users would be young women, typically between the ages of 20 to 30, that have an active lifestyle. Decision makers, on the other hand, are typically their parents or their spouses, right? And then the advocates, Yes, it could be the same user, it could be the woman, it could also be their parents, their spouses, but it could also be institutions, so schools, clubs, pubs, things like that. So if you think about it, what I do encourage you to consider is when crafting or creating your marketing or sales copy, you want to consider all of these different profiles because the language that you use to position your product in front of them might be different and might be worded in a more unique case depending on who you're speaking to. So if you're speaking to young women, you want to have maybe more of that vibrant, hip, but also empowering message. If you're speaking to a decision maker like their parents or spouse, it's more about protecting them, it's more about security, peace of mind. And then of course, if you're speaking to schools or institutions, it's more about reputation, it's about security, it's about safety, right? So your messaging will change a bit depending on who you're speaking to. So a quick sneak peek into next week's video. Next week, I'll be talking a bit more about B2B, talking about the layers of complexity between decision makers. I'll introduce the thin edge of the wedge concept, where we talk a bit more about how to get the foot into the door. I'll introduce the concept of the decision threshold. So how do you get people to move across, or how do you get organizations to move across that decision-making threshold? And I'll introduce the B2B prospecting map. So how do you map out who exactly is the right person to speak to in an organization, so that when you speak to future organizations, your sales process will become a bit more streamlined. So look forward to next week's video. If you have any requests, if you have any ideas, any suggestions, any comments, feel free to comment down below in the video. All right, until then, see you next week.